No is often better than a yes. When you get a yes or kind of positive feedback, there's really nowhere to go with that. You're like, okay, great. You like what I'm doing, and I guess I'll just keep doing that. Whereas a no really reveals, or a negative comment really reveals that true opportunity. Like, why are they thinking about it that way? We never intended for that to be a problem. Why is it a problem? And I think both of those, both the yeses and nos, yes, keep doing what you're doing. Great. That's helpful from an emotional standpoint and from a moving your product forward standpoint. Nos help reveal what the opportunities are for you and for your product. And both of those are better than I don't care one way or the other. Like, the meh is the worst feedback to get, because even if somebody's telling you no, even if they're giving you substantial critique, they care enough about the product, they care enough about what you're trying to accomplish to provide that feedback. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, especially if you're getting hammered by customers or you're getting hammered by sales that they need these features in place in order to like reveal the product at this event. Like, understand that passion is coming from them because they want the product to be better, because they want the product to be successful. And the fact that they're taking the time to provide that feedback should absolutely be seen as a positive.
Hello, Leaguers, and thank you for joining us again for another Practical Wednesday session. Now, in the world of product creation, negative feedback and failure are easy to come by. Some will say that they're too easy to come by, but the fact that it is so easy to come by, it doesn't make it any more easier or comfortable for us to deal with. Now, I want you to imagine a world where behind every feedback, criticism, or even a failure, there is an opportunity for you to shine. This is exactly what we're going to talk about today in this special Practical Wednesday session, turning failures into opportunities with Rick Turoczy. And what you are going to learn today are three things. First, how to get comfortable with negative feedback, because we all know that when you hear this feedback, you want to just die, right? You want to just disappear, but you need to be comfortable with that in order to build better products, because you need this feedback. We need this feedback. The second thing we're going to talk about is how to make it a critical part of your strategy. How can you actually build a strategy of a product, of a department, or of a team based on getting and giving feedback? And the third thing we're going to talk about is how to avoid falling into imposter syndrome. This is a super relevant topic, especially in days like this, crazy days like this, when so many people find themselves without a job or with different circumstances at work, or with products that may have been so popular and profitable just a month or 4 months ago, and now they face feedback and failure and things that just make all of us to wonder, are we in the right business? Are we doing the right thing? Are we actually going to be good product managers some days? And we are going to talk about all of that. And if you are looking to build your strength as product creators, well, you're in the right place. By the way, my name is Maria Cassis. I'm the founder and general manager of Product League, and what we do is helping you to become the best product manager you can be. We do it by special events like this one, but also by providing you with the best, most amazing mentoring program for product managers out there. And in just a few weeks, we are opening the registration to our sixth batch. So get ready, because in a few weeks only, you'll get the chance to join us and to become a leaguer. Now, I'm not going to talk about this subject alone. I brought in a amazing, awesome, super cool person to do it with me. I brought in Rick Turoczy, and I'm so excited to bring him to the stage.
Hi there.
What's up?
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here with us. Happy to have you here with us. So, just so you know why I am so excited about having Rick here with us today. So, Rick Turoczy has been working in, on, and around the Portland, Oregon startup community for more than 25 years. For the last decade, he ran by Portland Incubator Experiment, an ongoing experiment exploring how established entities like corporation, educational institutes, and even government can collaborate with startup communities for mutual benefit. He regularly advises, consults, and speaks on the topics of community management, startups, and accelerators around the world. And this is exactly, Rick, why you are the person to talk about this subject, because as a startup guy, you live it constantly, right? Like, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that corporations don't deal with failures, right? But
Right.
how they say it, I think that if we're talking about startups, the failure is evident, right? The feedback is there in your face. You can't run away
Yeah.
from it.
Right. It's
And
a very tight feedback loop, like constant iteration. So yeah, it's a
exactly.
daily, if not hourly occurrence for startups.
So true, so true. And this is the truth for every product manager out there, right? Because in some
Yep.
ways, when you're a product manager, when you're a product creator, it doesn't matter if you're in a corporate. You need to deal with it just if it was your startup, because you're responsible for the creation of a
Right.
new product, or just the new version of an already existed product, but you have to bring value to the table.
Yep.
There are users out there that waiting for you to bring, good, valuable decisions. There are other stakeholders, like sometimes
Mhm.
investors and, people on the board that just want to know how you're going to bring the next big thing to the
Yep.
market. So
Yep.
can't wait to learn from you. Seriously, this is such a big topic every day, but especially today because, well, the world is not what it used to be a few months
Yes.
ago,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so many people, it reflects on our life for so many
Yep.
people, our life, our job, our businesses. So, this is the right time to tell everyone out there, even if you are in a bad situation right now, you still have the chance to make it into a better one. And just by joining us today, you already made the first step. And this is just wonderful. Thank you so much, Rick, for this opportunity.
Of course. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Happy to have you here with us. And let's dive in.
Okay. Cool. Let me
The
flip
stage
over
is
to.
yours.
Thank you. Thanks very much to everyone who's in attendance. I'm really looking forward to your questions. And if anything comes up while I'm speaking, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we will get to those after I do my little talk here. But I was really honored to be asked to present on this because it's something I've struggled with throughout my career is dealing with feedback and dealing with it in a positive way. So who am I? You kind of got an intro to me. I've been working in startups for 25 years. For the first 12 years of my career, I was working in marketing communications and kind of product marketing roles. So I worked very closely with product management, have the ultimate respect for the jobs you're trying to do and for the number of stakeholders that are um, making use of your time and putting pressure on you on a regular basis. So I know what your role entails. I know how much you have to juggle on a regular basis. And I have a great deal of respect. I wrote a blog post not too long ago. Well, it's been years now, probably, but was basically entitled that everything is a product management problem. It's all about dealing with different things. Running a startup is a product management problem. Running an event is a everything is a product management problem. So while I never really served in corporate product management roles, I would serve in some startup product management roles. But again, just really appreciate you and the work that you do. So thank you for that, and thank you for being on this journey, and thanks for listening to this talk. Um, I think one of the hardest things to get my head around when we started companies was that it wasn't all about success. I think what you see on the outside of the startup world is people talking about $1 billion valuations and raising a ton of money and being overnight successes. But what we see behind the scenes is, as we were talking about earlier, just this iterative series of failures and adapting to those failures, taking the positives away from what we could learn from those failures, and just continuing to iterate to make sure that we're building the best product possible. And the reason failure is so valuable is because it points at something that's missing. It points at a gap. It also helps illuminate opportunities to fill those gaps or provide functionality that one of your customers might want. It might help you better define who your actual customer is, or if your customer persona is where it should be. It may reveal a whole new potential use case for your product or a potential new revenue stream. So we push into that failure and try and look at it as a way to continually now my screen froze. Failing already right here in the middle. But I think it's really hard to
We
embrace that.
lost you. We lost you for like, I don't know, like 10 seconds. But
Yes.
nothing worse than that. So, just if there was something, if there was something important in the last sentence of the previous slide, this is the right time to say it. Okay.
Nope, we're all good. So just where we were talking about failing invites opportunities for questions and criticism, but it's really hard to get your head around that being a positive, as we were talking about. And I think that comes in part because so many of us have gone through educational systems, or even like I was an athlete my entire life. And so even in sporting events or those kind of things, you're always taught to excel, get good grades, straight A's. Don't work on the things you're already good at, work on the things you're weak at, and try and improve those to A's. And you should never be failing. You should always be succeeding. And so the challenge here is to just kind of turn that thinking on its head, even though that's the way we've all been kind of indoctrinated to think about actual success and progress in the world. And that can be the hardest thing for early stage founders to kind of get their head around. But the way we learned to make this happen more effectively is that even in those school environments, one of the places that failure is always expected and embraced is in experiments. And so for us at our organization in PI, which stands for the Portland Incubator Experiment, we're located on the West Coast of the United States in Portland, Oregon, which for folks who haven't been to the States or maybe haven't been to the West Coast, we're kind of midway between Seattle and San Francisco. So two major tech hubs, but we're a much smaller startup community here in Portland. And we intentionally named Pi an experiment to always encourage us to continue to push the envelope and continue to fail. And it gave us kind of this safety net where we could say, that was just an experiment. We can stop doing that. It didn't work. Or maybe we need to try that a different way. Maybe we need to experiment a different way. And as we mentioned, it's really just this ongoing experiment. We've never done it the same way twice. It usually involves a lot of mentorship from people in the community, and a variety of startups that we bring in, a variety of corporations that we partner with. So while I've never worked for a corporation, we've partnered with corporations like Google and Coca-Cola and Nike. We're currently partnered with Autodesk, which is a major software manufacturer, specifically in architecture and 3D printing and those kind of things. So we're always at this nexus of bringing a lot of different people together for this common cause, much like you are as a product manager. So lots of people with expectations about what Pi could and should do, but then we are in the role of continuing to push the experiment forward. Now, the experiment up until about 5 months ago was shared workspace with about 10 to 15 startups all sitting in the same space. And we had three particular flavors of pie that we worked on. And we always use bad pie puns. It's just what we do with pie. So the first one was our wheelhouse, where we began software as a service, mobile apps, those kind of things. We launched a project focused on hardware or manufactured objects. And then our third accelerator program is focused on traditional consumer products. So food and beverage, apparel, beauty, those kind of things. And we're working with founders who are just starting out. So pre-revenue, pre-funding, often pre-prototype, and trying to push them further faster than they would be able to go on their own. Okay, so that's the background. That's the work we do, is working with startups, early stage founders, day in and day out. How can this help you? Well, in my experience, both working with product managers and startup founders, y'all have a lot in common with one another. You're very often passionate about a product that you want to see exist in the world. You take that product very personally. You take the success or failure or mistakes with that very personally, and you are directly in charge of kind of leading the vision and driving that product into becoming a reality. So you do have a lot in common with these people who are starting businesses. Some of the things that are less common is generally a startup founder is juggling way more than just a product. They're dealing with the business and investors and the board and press and all kinds of other things that they're trying to do. So they don't have the kind of ability to focus or wherewithal or time to focus in the way you might focus on a product. So in some ways, your products might be more personal to you than even a startup founder, because the startup founder's job is really to build a business, less so a product. One of the things we always ask our founders is, if you had to kill this product in order for your business to survive, is that something you'd be willing to do? Because that's the real indicator of, are you building a business or are you trying to build a product? So that's a little bit different between the two of you. The most simple first step is realizing that failure is just an unintended or unexpected outcome. It's no different than a positive outcome. It's just a different outcome. And trying to kind of detach a bit from that failure as something that you feel personally or emotionally, or see as something going wrong or that you could have fixed, just embrace that failure as an outcome and record it as you would any other outcome. It's really just another data point that will help you revise the product and move your company forward. Now, for startup founders, sometimes that failure can be massive. It can be the failure of the entire company. Whereas sometimes for products, that failure can simply be a missing feature or an opportunity to build a new feature. But if you can step back from categorizing it as failure and see it as an outcome, hopefully that can give you some of the emotional distance to really use that to your benefit. Much in the same way, yes and no are metrics. And we run into this a ton with early stage startup founders who are trying to raise money from investors. So they start to get really beat up and feeling down that they're getting no's from a lot of investors. They'll go pitch 40 people and get 40 no's, and it can get really emotionally taxing for them, where they start to question, like, am I supposed to be doing this? Is my idea even worthwhile or valid? And so we really try and help them understand those no's simply as metrics and guideposts to help them better right size what is really their target market, like find the investors where their stories are going to effectively resonate with them. So again, if you can step back where failure is just an outcome, and these yeses and nos or these critiques that you're getting, they're really just data points you're gathering. They're not necessarily a negative thing for you or your product. They're just a way of you uncovering what's going on in the world around you. And to that end, no is often better than a yes. When you get a yes or kind of positive feedback, there's really nowhere to go with that. You're like, okay, great. You like what I'm doing. and I guess I'll just keep doing that. Whereas a no really reveals, or a negative comment really reveals that true opportunity. Like, why are they thinking about it that way? We never intended for that to be a problem. Why is it a problem? And I think both of those, both the yeses and nos, yes, keep doing what you're doing. Great. That's helpful from an emotional standpoint and from a moving your product forward standpoint. Nos help reveal what the opportunities are for you and for your product. And both of those are better than the I don't care one way or the other. Like, the meh is the worst feedback to get, because even if somebody's telling you no, even if they're giving you substantial critique, they care enough about the product, they care enough about what you're trying to accomplish to provide that feedback. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, especially if you're getting hammered by customers or you're getting hammered by sales that they need these features in place in order to like reveal the product at this event. Like, understand that that passion is coming from them because they want the product to be better, because they want the product to be successful. And the fact that they're taking the time to provide that feedback should absolutely be seen as a positive. As much as you love your product, don't get precious about your product. And by that, I mean you you cannot protect your product from that feedback. You should be accepting and assimilating that feedback. And that can be really hard for something that you're super emotional and passionate about. It can be really hard not to take that personally. And sometimes it very much takes a, you know, take the feedback and sleep on it. Like, don't even try and process it at the time. Gather the feedback, get some distance from it, and then really assess objectively, what is that feedback telling you? Or what is that feedback revealing that you might not have seen before? And try and detach from the personal, like feeling attacked because someone is criticizing your product or telling you no. And this is all really hard. I'm not trying to be flippant about this. I've been working on this for 25 years. I still have difficulty with it, but I just try and reinforce with myself, be it, continuing to come back to the experiment and what we're trying to do with Pi, which is continually experiment, or whether it's someone critiquing, the program they're going through, or critiquing the way we delivered some of our services, trying to remember that negative feedback is really just feedback. And it doesn't need to be categorized as positive or negative. It's simply feedback, and you should be using that feedback to really drive you forward. Because every time, again, someone mentions something negative, that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to improve. It's an opportunity to ask additional questions. It's an opportunity for a conversation. It's an opportunity to dig deeper as to what even caused that critique to come about. It's an opportunity to reassess your strategy. Um, I think every negative, if you can get in the mindset of flipping that into a positive, can be incredibly beneficial from a product management standpoint and can help make you more effective at the work you're trying to do. I think one of the challenges is this balance you have to find. And in startup founders, and I think it's very similar for product managers, I kind of refer to it as entrepreneurial schizophrenia. And I need to come up with a better term for it, but the thought being that you have this vision and mission, which is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning and keeps you going day after day. And maybe that's your product vision or your product roadmap or your ongoing strategy. But then you also need to be really tactical. And the founder needs to be focused on, what am I getting done in the next hour? What am I getting done today? So they don't become completely negative or stoic or unemotional. They need to be emotional to be driven by that vision. But they also have to find ways to objectively assess what's happening with their business so that they can improve it and drive it forward. I feel like product manager, I don't feel like I even have to say this to most product managers. I think there's a real distinct level of optimism in product management, except when you're getting hammered by everybody and you have to deliver things on a timeline. I know it can get hard, and you're always juggling a lot of different things. But I find product managers to be inherently optimistic. I think in dealing with so many different parties, you have a natural ability to be empathetic. So lean into that and use it to kind of diffuse some of the negative feelings or some of the powerless feelings you might be feeling. Like, why is that? Let me put myself in their shoes. Why is that person providing that feedback right now? Why is it important to them to phrase it that way? Why are they so upset about, like, what got them to the point that they're super upset about this kind of stuff? And that empathy that you already bring to the table, just leaning into that can be super helpful in dealing with negative feedback or problems that crop up. So I always encourage startups to, as I said, kind of take take the feedback in, take negative and positive, it's all feedback. Embrace the failures and kind of figure out why they failed. Reflect on those things. If necessary, ask further questions. Again, why did you say that? Or why didn't the product work the way we thought it was going to? Why didn't the market respond in this way? Why didn't we close that deal when the sales team told us this was a feature that we needed? And continue to kind of explore that, research that, interrogate those kind of issues, and then assimilate it into your larger strategy. Just because it's a problem or a negative critique doesn't mean you need to implement it immediately. And this is another challenge we see with startup founders. So what will happen, we refer to it as like mentor whiplash. So they'll sit down with one mentor who's a successful business person or former startup founder. They will provide them with, if I were in your shoes, this is what I would do. So I recommend you do that. And then practically within the next hour, they'll sit down with another mentor, also a very successful business person, who tells them exactly the opposite of what that previous mentor told them. And so if they just kind of whiplash back and forth, they'll have no clear direction. So it's really important that they understand that no matter how intelligent all these people are, no matter how intelligent the feedback you're getting, you're the one in the driver's seat. And it's your job to kind of assimilate that feedback and figure out where it's most meaningful for your product. Maybe that feedback doesn't need to be even on the product roadmap for another year or 18 months. Maybe that's something you can fix overnight really quickly, but you have the expertise and really the kind of vantage point to make that assessment of where that feedback belongs and how it will influence your product or company going forward, because you're the only one who can see all of those moving parts. We talked about imposter syndrome. I mean, we see it a ton in the startup world. I don't know what I'm doing. How do I get people to believe I'm capable of doing this stuff? Everybody seems to know more about this stuff than I do. Other people have way more experience. I'm just an imposter. I should give up. And what I always try and remind our founders is there's absolutely no one who knows as much about your product and all the various parties or your business and all the various inputs and outputs as you do. I often refer to it with a phrase where it's like, common sense is not common. Frankly, it's only common to you. You think it's common sense because you think about this stuff all day, every day, or because you have all these different vantage points that you can use to assess. But no one thinks about it quite the way you do, which makes you exactly the right person to be working on that problem and exactly the right person to bring the different parties together you need to kind of fix the product and keep it moving forward. Be ready to adapt. I think that's the other thing with these feedback loops is sometimes we get really hung up on, product roadmap, or we plan to do this by this date, or this is the market we need to enter, and we need to do it by Q3 of this year. Like, you can plan, but and use that as a way to guide you, but you shouldn't necessarily always feel beholden to it. I mean, we mentioned at the top of the show, none of us saw this pandemic coming, and it will change every product roadmap out there. You can't assume that even smaller incremental changes aren't also going to affect your product roadmap. So as you're taking the feedback, as you're getting these positives and negatives, make sure, and as you're assimilating the information, make sure it's influencing your product roadmap in a way that's most beneficial for the product from your perspective, because you do know more about it than anyone else. And again, be willing to deviate from that path. That may be, and I'm maybe that doesn't ring true for people who are in corporations where there's significant management structure, and like public companies where there are numbers tied to these things. Like, you may not have as much leeway depending on your role, but I can tell you, in the startup world, with startup founders, they have to be prepared to kind of move different directions as quickly as they possibly can to take advantage of opportunities that are availed by the feedback they're getting. And if you work in an environment where you're allowed to have a little bit of that leeway, embrace it. Don't be too like stuck on, this is where we need to go and this is how we need to get there. There may be a different way to get there, and it might be off the beaten path. Or it may reveal there's an entirely different market that you didn't think about when you were writing that plan, or creating the product roadmap, and it may shift things drastically, but it may be a huge opportunity for your product and your company, and you should be willing to embrace that. So this is the kind of next level up. So all those things, like, treat failure as just an outcome, treat it as such. No is often better than yes. And those are really just metrics to help kind of guide you on your product roadmap or on the path forward. Once you get comfortable starting to kind of assimilate that negative feedback, where you're not necessarily seeking it out, but it's inbound, then the real way to kind of level up your game is to go out and intentionally seek that feedback. And that could be something as simple as loss analysis for a deal. Get the opportunity to call somebody as to why they didn't buy your product or why they rejected the feature set. Like, that can be a really informative way, and you're intentionally going out to seek that criticism and potentially negative feedback, but that's not something that would naturally come inbound to you. You have to go get it. And then, if you want to get really crazy about it, we sometimes do things where we create products that we know are intentionally going to fail. They're like either targeted at the wrong market, or we realize the feature set is bad, just to get the conversation going so that people start providing the feedback that will be valuable to us in creating new products. So if you have, again, the ability to do that kind of work, then it's a really good way to kind of test the market or test your personas by creating things that you know are going to fail. And that also helps you kind of embrace that failure is just an outcome and not something that you need to be as concerned about. I think you get feedback from everyone. That's what we tell all the startups, whether it's your target market or somebody who's not in your target market, whether it's a potential user or somebody who's outside of your user base. We often get questioned as to why we have teenagers or college age kids who are part of our mentor group, because people often expect mentors to be expert and 25 years of work like me before they can mentor a startup. And what we've found is that it takes a wide variety of feedback to help people build the best products possible, and that teenager or college student may have a much better understanding of how the product could potentially be used than somebody who's a veteran in the business. So try and get as much feedback as you potentially can. Every time you learn from a mistake, document that, help other people prevent making that mistake or getting that kind of feedback that might not be helpful for them, and then go out and make new mistakes. That's your opportunity. Every time you recover from a mistake is your opportunity to build upon that and make a new mistake so that others can learn from what you're learning in the market as well. But last but not least, keep experimenting. This is all just a big experiment. Every product is a big experiment. Pie is a big experiment. And if you can kind of embrace that experimentation, if you can get back to that way of thinking about projects as a test of the market or products as a potential opportunity or an experiment within that market, I think that can really help with getting that emotional space you need to assimilate the feedback and do what you can with it. So thank you.
That was great.
Cool. Thank you.
And I
Thanks
love
for
the
the time.
slides. I just love the slides. Thank you so much, Rick. Now,
Sure.
I I know that the audience, is still thinking about the questions because there is so much stress involved in this
Yeah.
topic, right? This is
Yep.
not an easy one to handle. So at the meantime, while they are getting the questions in the chat, and just take off everything that is on their heart and mind when it comes to failure and feedback and
Yep.
how to deal with
Yeah.
that, how about we will run a few just lines of tips and tricks that you just
Okay.
mentioned, and just some things to get the discussion more practical. I think that the one that I would like to start with is actually something that you brought up in on the slides in the presentation.
Yeah.
um, the definition, the need for redefinition of what a win is, because
Yep.
winning is not about fulfilling the thought or the road that you had on day one.
Right.
This
Right.
is not a win, right?
Yeah.
A win is
Yeah.
actually to have a goal or a mission or something like that, and to feel
Mhm.
at the end, and hopefully also in the middle, that like you made it, you succeeded, you
Yeah.
brought value to the world, right? And the
Yes.
need for redefinition of what a win is, this is just a top tip for everyone to, we needed to make like banners of that, like to put it in the streets. Like no one is in the street these days, but if people were in the street, we just need to put it there, or I don't know, like to ask Netflix to open every show with this reminder to everyone out there about the
Yeah.
need of the redefinition of what a win is. So this is one. What is the second thing that, like tip or trick or something like that you would like people to get from
Yeah.
this amazing talk?
Yeah. I think it's in many ways you are not your product, and giving yourself the emotional distance to think objectively about your product, still be passionate about it, obviously still be driven, but you are not your product, and somebody critiquing your product does not necessarily reflect poorly upon you. I think that can be the hardest thing for people to kind of get through in doing this work, because you're working on so many different parts and you're driving this vision forward, so you obviously take it very personally. But I think if you can figure out ways to kind of get some of that detachment and realize that the feedback is going to help you improve that product you love so much, then maybe you don't take that as personally or as emotionally as you might otherwise. And I think that's really important for folks.
Absolutely. And there is another level, another aspect of, being attached to the product as well, that has to do with the fact, and everybody knows that, but no one talks about it. I don't know why, that when you get feedback, negative feedback from someone,
Hmm.
it left there with you for a long time after this person already forgot about your discussion,
Yeah. Yep.
right? It can be with a colleague or with the user, a customer, a potential investor,
Yeah.
someone, I don't know, from the management team, whoever it is. Like you are sitting there an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. You finally like you get home and it's still stuck in your head, even in the
Yeah.
evening. Like the day is over, but this session feedback is not over for you. And this other person forgot about it probably 2 minutes
Right.
max after you
Right.
had a discussion,
Yep.
because we're so much invested in everything that we do that, like, for us it's like, everything is a matter of life or death. It's
Hmm.
there with us, but it's not that of a big deal,
Yeah.
especially for the other person.
Right. Yeah. And I totally, that totally resonates with me. Like, I'm the guy who wakes up at 3 a.m. 4 weeks later and is like, I can't believe that they said that about that thing. Um, so I think, that can be really difficult to manage. I think another thing that you sparked for me as you were describing that was sometimes it's who that feedback is coming from that causes you to either place more value in it or discount it in a way that you might maybe you shouldn't. And I
Hmm.
think kind of balancing all feedback with, yes, you have a certain level of expertise or a certain position in the business, but that doesn't provide necessarily undue weight to your opinion that one of our users might provide or somebody on the development team might provide. And how do you balance those when so much of the hierarchical structure of the corporation is based on things like, if this person is a vice president, their opinion matters more. And figuring out ways to kind of detach feedback from roles can be another effective way of kind of assimilating and figuring out what's right for your product.
Absolutely, it's spot on, and it's a little counterintuitive, but it may be that the remedy to have imposter syndrome is actually to become like the owner, right?
Yeah.
To raise yourself up, to have a little self-esteem,
Hmm.
and then it's like, okay, you're already in this position, so when someone is giving you a feedback, like, first of all, you're like, okay, that's part of life, that's part of creation process, product management
Yep.
process, like, that's fine, that's totally fine. And I'm taking away the title, I'm taking away the feelings that I also may
Hmm.
have to this person, either if you like them or not. I don't know, this is
Right.
like a whole other topic, but
Yeah,
you
for
know.
sure. The emotional baggage of product management. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. So just like put it aside, like grow yourself a little, grow your
Hmm.
self-esteem, and then
Yep.
again, it's counterintuitive, but the result of that will be that you won't feel like a fake,
Right. Right.
because
Yeah.
you own your shit. Pardon my French, right? But
Yeah.
you own your stuff, you own your work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of visualizing yourself as the owner or as the lead can be a really helpful kind of, it's not a trick, but like it can help kind of center your vision and your confidence in dealing with some of that feedback for sure. And I think the challenge, and this is particularly from a startup founder standpoint, the challenge is when you start to believe that too much, or when you're projecting that everything's great when stuff isn't great. Like there's a happy medium there, and where you have to be optimistic, but you also have to be realistic about what's going on and not, you see so many startup founders that are like, the product's great and our customers love us and we're going to raise all this money. And, little to none of that is true. And that kind of, you know, fake it till you make it behavior can also be as corrosive as just kind of letting that negative feedback get you down emotionally, for sure.
Yeah, we all know the saying, build it and they will come, right? When
Mm,
you're so focused on your thinking about the product and you're so sure that everyone will follow. And I think what you just said is so important. Going back to what we said before about shifting the discussion, I
mhm.
think that the discussion shouldn't be, is feedback is good or bad for me, because we need to take it as obvious that feedback is good for you, either if
Yep.
it's a good feedback or negative feedback. It's good for you as a professional, as a person, as someone on the process to grow, right?
Mhm.
And the thing is how to find a fine tuning between owning your work, owning your capabilities and knowledge, and what you are good at and what you know about your product, and still getting feedback. Like this is the hassle.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not about just big wins, or as I said the first and then the opening of the talk about just the success stories and
Yep.
7 8 figures, whatever it will be. It's not about that. The real game, the real battle is about finding this really soft point
Yep.
of how do you sure enough in what you do, but
Mhm.
you're still open enough to get feedback. I
Well,
love this discussion.
and find those folks, like, there are going to be folks in your organization who can provide negative feedback to you in a very compelling way that matches your personality or the way you want to receive that feedback, and try and find those individuals on a variety of teams. Maybe it's somebody in engineering who's providing feedback in a really great way that's right in line with how you like to receive feedback. Lean on that person to kind of develop that rapport. Maybe it's one of the executives has a really good way of guiding or providing different feedback for you, and try and align with those folks who kind of not necessarily only give you good news or only kind of fill you up, but that communicate in a way that is good for you emotionally, so that you can deal with and process that feedback because you understand where they're coming from and you're receiving the information the way that you need it.
That's a beautiful tip, and I'll actually take it even a step further. And I'll say that once you find these people and you like build this team or group
Hmm.
around you, even if they know that they are on your team or not, you need to actively ask feedback from them,
Yes.
because
Yeah,
then it
absolutely.
becomes casual, right?
Yep.
So once a week, once 2 weeks, once 4 weeks, whatever the relationship it is, ask these people for some feedback, and then it's just a casual business of like, dude,
Yeah.
how is it going,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So it's
Exactly.
less of a nightmare and just more of a chit chat on coffee.
Yep. Well, and at first, maybe you may be overwhelmed by their feedback, right? Where you're like, "Hey, tell me what you think about this," and they just give you everything. And then as you progress, and it becomes a more regular thing, then you're only getting small, really important snippets to add on to that original. So it may seem overwhelming, and be careful with how much feedback you ask for out of the gates.
Because you'll
But
get it.
get it. So maybe make it really focused about this one little thing. But yeah, I think you then develop that rapport, and then that, to your point, this becomes a very natural way of guiding your product vision or product roadmap going forward.
And your self growth as a person, as a human, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
part of the deal.
absolutely. Yep,
Perfect.
totally.
Okay, so we got a question from Solar, and I'm going to read this out. If I study product management just for 6 months to have certificate, do you think I can have good job at that, or I need to study it in university or for more time? Solar, this is not the topic for today. But we're going to turn this around. Okay, we're going to talk now about feedback. Okay, let's
Mhm.
see how can we use this discussion for feedback matters. So I think Solar, and of course Rick, like jump in, give your
Mhm.
input here as well. If what we're talking about today is feedback and how to deal with it, maybe your way to know what is the right path for you is to ask the people that you would like to hire, that you would like for them to hire you. Like,
Yep.
let's say you have some, just look for some HR managers in companies that you think that you would like to work for and with on LinkedIn, and ask them. And this is a way for you to get feedback, like actual real feedback from the people that you want to interact with in a more friendly basis, because you don't work with them yet. So
Yep. Yep.
both sides feel comfortable with each other, and you get the opportunity to grow from it, because
Yep.
as you very smartly, um, can I say smartly? Very intelligently, very intelligently, you said previously, Rick, it's not about getting a specific answer, right?
Right.
This is not
Right.
what you do when you ask for feedback. You
Right.
truly want to know what will give you the opportunity to win. So this is my tip. I just wonder,
Yeah.
like, if change the question a little. If a startup founder will come to you and say, Rick, how can I know if a product is good
Mm,
before I'm telling my wife or my husband, depends on the gender, that I'm leaving
yep.
work and I'm going to pursue my dream
Hmm.
and everything that comes with that. How would you tell them to look for this feedback and not necessarily in terms of, this feature or another, just in terms of the pursuit of a dream or
Yep.
this, path or another? I wonder what will be your answer.
Yeah. So one of the companies I founded, I did all the classic like things completely wrong. Like if I could probably write a book about how not to do a startup because we did all of those things. And one of the biggest mistakes we made with that company, and one of my slides kind of touched on it, was we were far too precious with the product and too protective of it. Like we thought, well, we know what we're doing, so we don't need to talk to anybody else. Clearly, the solution needs to exist. And that was a complete mistake. I think so many founders get stuck in the headspace of, well, if I tell somebody about it, they're going to steal my idea, which is, I always say to them, if telling someone else your idea is going to enable them to beat you, then maybe you should be working on a different idea because like you should be focused on the thing you're going to be driving into the market and successful with. But I think to get back to your question, start to socialize it as much as you can and get out of your immediate friend circle or family circle because what all you will only get positive feedback from those folks. I mean, it'll be very rare for somebody in your immediate circle to be like, that's a dumb idea, you shouldn't do that, or I would go about it this way rather than that way. They'll mostly go, 9 times out of 10 they'll be like, that's a great idea, honey, you should do that, maybe you should try that. And that's not the feedback you need. You need the feedback from the potential market or from the potential employees that are like, no, I'd be really excited to work on a project like that, or that's a really interesting problem, I'd love to muck around with some code to see how we could fix that thing. So the sooner you can get outside of your immediate bubble, getting feedback from a variety of different folks, that
Hmm.
will really help you determine whether it's a real opportunity or whether it's just an opportunity you perceive. Because the biggest challenge with a startup is it's just all timing. Like you could be the smartest, best leader ever with the greatest, most amazing idea in a well-funded, corporation, and your idea can still fail just because of timing. Like it's not the right idea at the right time. So you really need to test the time and space you're in to help you determine with it is the right time or we're too late, somebody else is already down that path and I need to think differently about it, or more often than not it's like we're way too early. We've made this intellectual leap that the market is not ready to make, and we know that this product will be a good product 5 years from now. But if the market's not ready to take the product or buy the product, you're not going to have a business. So that kind of feedback, timing wise, is the most critical feedback any founder can kind of try and gauge for building a company.
That was very valuable. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. And I
Sure.
just got an idea.
Yep.
How about we will challenge us both, okay? And we'll take the discussion into another direction, super relevant, just the other aspect of it.
Mhm.
How do we give feedback the right way, in a way that
Yep.
people can actually learn from and grow from? I spent 2 years in the venture capital world, and I think that was the best school ever
Mhm.
for how to tell people no with the biggest
Right.
smile,
Right. Yep.
possible. So I wonder what are your tricks? How can we actually give someone the feedback that they can grow from?
So to your earlier point, for feedback to be truly effective, you have to build up a trust with the person providing the feedback. And so you can't just dive into like really deep critical feedback with someone you just met. That will never work. Some people are fans of the like compliment, then critique, then compliment kind of stuff. Like that works for some people. I tend to be just more straightforward and honest, um, but also try and really establish the reason I'm providing that feedback the way that I am. Like I'm always very clear with our founders or mentors. This is my job and this is what I'm trying to accomplish so that everybody succeeds. And if I'm coming at you with some critical feedback, it's with that job in mind. It's not directed at you. Um, I'm often guilty of, some people refer to it as the kind of bring me a rock kind of thing. No, not that rock. Bring me another rock. And I'm always like, guess what's in my head? Like I sometimes make intuitive leaps where I don't do a good job of explaining why I made that leap. So I try and be um, almost over explanatory about why I'm providing the feedback or the context that that feedback is coming from, because that can make it easier for the person to absorb once they have that context and to diffuse as many assumptions as possible. Like, is Rick just in a bad mood today? Is that why he's providing the feedback, or like, is there actually is there some driver here for that stuff?
Yes, and it also has to do with the outcomes of what you actually let someone know in the feedback. Because if, for example, I don't know, like where I'm managing a team, okay, and I need to say to someone, listen, I appreciate the work that you've put into something, but the deadline is in 2 days, and we are so way behind. And
Yep.
because of that, I ask you to do that, and that. And my feedback to you is that let's not focus on that thing, which was your hypothesis as to how to solve something. Let's move to something else. And I'm telling them that it's because there is a deadline, so
Mhm.
it's less personal, right?
Yeah.
As you said,
Well,
it's like
and
it's not because I'm god on, it's just like being in a bad mood, as you said before.
right, right. And it's sometimes approaching it from the how can I be most helpful so that we both attain the goal we're hoping to attain? Like what can I do to help resolve the situation rather than coming at it with like, this is your problem, go fix it. But like how do we partner to achieve the outcome that we're both driving toward?
Yes, and we're almost about the time to be end. So I want us to
Mhm.
talk a little more about the imposter syndrome. Okay,
Yeah,
just
for sure.
such a critical topic to talk about, and I would just say one of the things that were very surprised for me, very very surprising for me to learn. I think I got to really understand it not more than a year ago. Like
Okay.
really, it took me a long time to understand that. And I wonder what is your point of view about the topic and just the whole idea of imposter syndrome. I think that the talented you are, the more chances that you'll actually suffer from imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
Because if you are talented and if you are invested in what you do, like truly open for like I will do everything. I just want to make it work. I just want to see
Yep.
this happen, right? I just want to see it shine and live. The bigger this wonderful attitude that you have,
Mhm.
the bigger the chances that you'll actually feel that you are the reason for something not to go well, or
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
you thought it would go. Like, and actually the it's counterintuitive, right? Because we will assume that
Hmm.
the more talented people, the smartest people, those that their heart is in the right place, and also their
Hmm.
talent will be more assured of their abilities, and their self-esteem will be higher. But
Right.
actually, and this was seriously, I've learned this like only like a year ago. It took me
Hmm.
a long time to
Yeah.
really process it, that the less talented people, let's call it this way, if we are in any position to say who is more or less talented, are less open for the feedback, and they will get the feedback and it just, they shut it. that it
Yep.
doesn't get in and doesn't affect them. So if you feel that you may have imposter syndrome, if you feel that you're fake, if you feel that you're not good enough, I'm not saying that necessarily you're the next big genius, okay?
Hmm.
But it is something for you to think about, that actually the reason why you care so much is because you care so much,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
because
No, I
you are open for
totally
the
agree.
feedback.
Yep. Well, and I think it all comes back, just to bring it all the way back around. Imposter syndrome is driven by a fear of failure. And if you figure out a way to better deal with setbacks and critiques and failures, you will find that starting to erode some of that imposter syndrome. So that can be another really good outcome of this kind of stuff, and this kind of feedback loop is you do develop that level of confidence you need to guide the product. And I think one piece of advice I have for folks, I know you have a mentoring program too, like I always encourage people who are suffering from imposter syndrome to just go mentor somebody for half an hour on their topic of expertise. And they're like, usually the outcome of that is they're like, I was just telling them basic stuff and they were scribbling notes down on everything I said. I didn't realize I knew so much about this thing. And that can be a really rewarding way for both parties of diffusing that imposter syndrome by reminding people how talented and knowledgeable they actually are.
It's funny you say, because a few weeks ago we had an Ask Me Anything session with our mentors, and
Mhm.
one of the mentees
Mhm.
asked them, "What was the moment that you felt that you made it? Like that's it. Like you reached the goal. Like you reached a stage in your career that you can
Uh-huh.
say, I did it. I did it." And one of the mentors said that when she's going for lunch with colleagues and it's just people from the industry, and
Mhm.
they ask her, and like you don't just ask what's going on with your product, what's going on with the business, stuff like that, and they share it with her, and she saying her thoughts about the subject, and they're like, wow, that's good. And and this
Yeah.
is she said it this way: this is why I love going for lunch with other
Yeah.
people, because it's like casual reminder that
Mhm.
you actually do know what
Yeah.
you do, right? And that everything that we encounter with on our work is
Mhm.
just a step towards success. Because
Yep.
if I was to tell you that the thing that you are failing in doing today, the process that you're actually learning how to solve this failure, and how if either
Mhm.
if it's technical or a strategic problem or something like that, will help you to achieve something huge, to build the next unicorn, I don't know, something like big in the
Yep.
next 5 years, you won't mind,
Mhm.
right? You
Yep.
say, of
Right.
course, yeah, bring it on, like whatever I can do in terms to build it there to have this success then. So this is how we need to treat every failure, as you said, because we just grow with that. Every feedback,
Mhm.
every failure, every stepping stone. At the end, it's a lesson, it's an opportunity for us to have this lesson, because it's only if we choose to take this as a lesson. So it's an opportunity for us to learn something from that. And who knows if we will use this opportunity, the next thing that we will build may be bigger than what we can actually dream of building.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it reminded me of how do you know you've made it? One of the things we really focused on at Pi is it's a similar question, like how do you know a founder has been successful in your program? And one of the clearest signs that a founder is getting value out of our program is when they come to us with a problem unprompted, or come to us requesting feedback unprompted. I think so much of what founders are trying to do is pretend everything is okay. That once you've built up that level of trust with someone where they go, look, I know I'm supposed to be the CEO here, but I have no idea what I'm doing with X, Y, or Z. That's where we feel like we've really made the breakthrough point with founders when they're coming to us with those requests.
Spot on. Now, Rick, I want to challenge you before we close the session. We are product managers, so
Yep.
it's all about prioritization, right? So
Yep.
I will ask you to think about one thing that you would like everyone to do differently or to think about differently tomorrow morning. A trick, tip, something, that if they will do, will change your tomorrow. And at the meantime, that you are
Mhm.
thinking about, I want to remind everyone to like this video and to like our page because we want to get to know you better. And unless you'll do that, we won't be able to invite you to future awesome events like this one. So please do that. And Rick, prioritizing one thing that will change the audience life tomorrow.
So I think it's a great question. And I think just off the top of my head, just it doesn't even need to be anything big. Just embrace a failure that you encounter. It could be your toothbrush fell on the floor. It could be you burnt dinner. It could be like come at that from come at that from an angle where you can find something positive to take away from that. And even just dealing with something that small will start to rewire your brain to think about these outcomes and metrics in different ways. So just start to put that into practice. Doesn't even need to be in your business. Could be at home, could be somewhere else, but just start to kind of think about failure or negative feedback differently.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Of
Rick
course. Thanks
Turoczy.
for having me.
I had so much fun. I hope that you had the same.
I did. Yes. Thank you.
That's the spirit. Thank you very much, especially in crazy days like that. Our
Yeah.
community, the fact that we are sharing information and knowledge, from Portland to other places in the world. I'm now based in Tel Aviv, so the fact that we are all united
Yep.
around the idea of just becoming better and stronger in what we do, both as professionals and as humans, because after all, we are people.
Right.
Um, it's just heartwarming, and I thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really
Happy
appreciate
to.
it.
Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.